Not marble, nor the gilded monuments of princes shall outlive this powerful rhyme.
William Shakespeare, the third child of John and Mary Shakespeare, was born in Stratford-upon-Avon in 1564. Stratford-upon-Avon was a small market town with a population of some 2,000 people. 9 out of 10 Englishmen still lived in the country. This earliest known illustration of Shakespeare's birthplace was done more than 150 years after his death. Little interest had been taken in Shakespeare's life in the years following his death, and the first full-length biography did not appear until 1709. Much of what is known of Shakespeare's life stems from research into the official records of the period. 1564, April the 26th. Guleelmus Filius Johannes Shakespeare. This entry in the Stratford Parish Register records the date William Shakespeare was christened. The poet's father was a prosperous glover and tanner. His mother was the daughter of a land-owning family. This shows the Guildhall in Stratford, where Shakespeare's father attended council meetings as an alderman. It is likely that Shakespeare attended this grammar school situated above the Guildhall. Here he would have studied Latin and learned to read the Bible, which had only recently been translated into English.
Then the whining schoolboy, with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail unwillingly to school.
In 1582, Shakespeare, then 18, married Anne Hathaway, 8 years his senior, the daughter of a farmer who lived in this cottage in the nearby village of Shottery. The first of their 3 children, Susanna, was born in 1583, and the twins, Hamnet and Judith, were born in 1585. Little is known of Shakespeare's life just after his marriage. Sometime in the late 1580s, Shakespeare left Stratford for London. He would have begun his journey by crossing Clopton Bridge over the River Avon. Legend has it that Sir Thomas Lucy of Charlecote forced the young poet to fly his native country because he had poached deer and rabbits. Sir Thomas may have prosecuted Shakespeare. Shakespeare is said to have written a ballad about Sir Thomas, which was so very bitter that the poet was forced to leave Stratford. Another explanation for the young poet's departure is that Shakespeare joined a group of travelling players who passed through Stratford. It was common for groups of actors to tour the country, performing on wooden trestles. The Elizabethan age was one of the most dynamic and expansive periods in English history. A time of pageantry and drama, life at court and in London seemed to confirm Shakespeare's claim that all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. Elizabeth's long reign, which stretched from 1558 to 1603, spanned the major part of Shakespeare's life.
When Shakespeare first came to London, Queen Elizabeth was an old woman. As a foreign visitor observed,
"Her face oblong, fair but wrinkled, her eyes small, yet black and pleasant, her nose a little hooked, her lips narrow, and her teeth black. A defect the English seem subject to from their too great use of sugar. Her hair was of an auburn colour, but false."
At this time, the nation was feeling jubilation and pride following the great victory. In 1588, the English fleet had defeated the Spanish Armada in the English Channel. The victory left England free to develop her trade and colonies in the New World.
London was the capital of England and
So superior to other English towns that London is not said to be in England, but rather England to be in London.
London had a population of some 200,000, and the city had an air of excitement and variety to be found nowhere else in England.
This city of London is so large and splendidly built, so populous and excellent in crafts and merchant citizens, and so prosperous that it is not only the first in the whole realm of England, but is esteemed one of the most famous of all Christendom.
English houses of the period were commonly of 2 stories.
Except in London, where they are of 3 and 4, though but seldom of 4. It is now commanded, no one shall erect any new house, except it be made wholly of brick or of brick and stone, The forefront shall be made of that uniform order and form prescribed for that street.
There were over 120 churches in Shakespeare's London, and the city was far from quiet.
For the English are vastly fond of great noises that fill the ears, such as the firing of cannon, drums, and the ringing of bells, so that in London it is common for a number of them to go to some belfry and ring the bells for hours together, merely for the sake of exercise.
The largest building in London, St. Paul's, was used as a place of worship and as a common meeting place. Another important centre in Shakespeare's London was the city of Westminster with its Abbey. Here also stood the Parliament House and Westminster Hall, where civil lawsuits were decided. A notorious event during the time Shakespeare resided in London was the Gunpowder Plot of 1605, led by Guy Fawkes.
Very early this morning, a horrible conspiracy of the Papists against the King and the whole realm was discovered, to destroy the Parliament House and all therein by gunpowder this day.
Those behind the plot were caught and executed as traitors.
Last of all came Fawkes, that should have put fire to the powder. Weak with torture and sickness, he was scarce able to go up the ladder, but yet, with much ado by the help of the hangman, went high enough to break his neck with the fall. The quarters of these traitors are placed over London gates, and their heads set upon the bridge.
There was only one bridge across the Thames at London in Shakespeare's day.
Worthily to be numbered among the miracles of the world, 21 piles of stone, with 20 arches under which barks may pass, the lowest foundation being packs of wool, most durable against the force of water. At the top of one tower, almost in the centre of the bridge, was stuck on tall stakes more than 30 skulls of noble men who had been executed and beheaded for treason. The houses built upon the bridge are as great and high as those built on the firm land, so as a man cannot know that he passeth the bridge, but would judge himself to be in the street.
The commercial life of Shakespeare's London clustered around the River Thames.
Most of the inhabitants are employed in buying and selling merchandise and trading in almost every corner of the world, since the river is most useful and convenient for this purpose.
One of the main markets in London was Billingsgate.
The large watergate, port or harbour for ships and boats. Eastcheap is now a flesh market of butchers there, dwelling on both sides of the street. Also cooks mixed amongst the butchers, and such are victuals ready dressed of all sorts.
Those who bought had to be careful.
A shopkeeper tells you lies by rote. He never speaks so truly as when he says he'd use you as his brother, for he would abuse his brother, and in his shop thinks it lawful.
Much of life in the city took place in London's streets.
One can scarcely pass along the streets on account of the throng.
The streets were filled with such cries as,
Trays to mend, work for a tinker, ripe damsons, hard garlic, ink, fine writing ink, hot oat cakes, new almanacs, new river water, milkmaids below.
A peasant woman with fresh produce from the country was a common sight on her way to market. The water carrier followed his trade in the streets. Drinking water was let off from cisterns into
special wooden iron-bound vessels with broad bottoms and narrow tops, which poor labourers carry to and fro to the houses on their shoulders and sell. The child of darkness, a common night walker, a man that had no man to wait upon him but only a dog, the bellman of London.
This was the night watchman, who kept order in the streets after dark. A whipping administered by the constable was the customary punishment for a vagabond who was caught.
He is grievously whipped and burned through the gristle of the right ear with a hot iron, except some honest person worth £5 in goods or 20 shillings in land retain him in his service for 1 year.
Great care and expense were lavished on clothing. Almost as much thought was given to fashion by the wealthier London citizens as by the courtiers.
England is the player's stage of gorgeous attire, the ape of all nations' superfluities, the continual masker in outlandish habiliments. Women are well dressed, fond of taking it easy, and commonly leave the care of household matters and drudgery to their servants. They have great and monstrous ruffs made either of cambric, Holland lawn, or else of the finest cloth that can be got. If a storm chance, they go flip-flap in the wind like rags.
We here in London, what for dressing ourselves, following our worldly affairs, dining, supping, and keeping company, have no leisure, not so much as once to think of sin.
London was also a leading centre for the arts. Music was enormously popular in the Elizabethan age, and musicians and minstrels were to be found in all parts of the city.
On the south bank of the Thames, opposite St. Paul's, lay the borough of Southwark, also known as Bankside. Located here were a number of the theatres in London.
Provide yourself a lodging by the waterside. It adds a sort of state unto you to be carried from thence to the stairs of your playhouse.
Another place built in the form of a theatre serves for the baiting of bears and bulls. They are fastened behind and then worried by those great English dogs and mastiffs. But not without great risk to the dogs from the teeth of one and the horns of the other.
There is also a house where cockfights are held. In the centre on the floor, the cocks are teased and incited to fly at one another, while those with wagers as to which cock will win sit closest around the circular disc, and the party whose cock surrenders or dies loses the wager. The next places that are filled after the playhouses be emptied are taverns.
Visitors to London often commented on the number of
inns and beer gardens scattered about the city, where much amusement may be had with eating, drinking, fiddling, and the rest. In the alehouses, tobacco is lit in a pipe, the smoke sucked into the mouth. This they regard as a pleasure, and the habit is so common with them that they light up on all occasions, at the play, in the taverns, or elsewhere. And I'm told the inside of one man's vein after death was found to be covered in soot, just like a chimney.
gambling was a common amusement.
They have such sleight in sorting and shuffling the cards that play at what game you will. All is lost beforehand.
Taverns also served as meeting places.
How many lips have been worn out with kissing at the street door or in the entry in a winking blind evening? How many odd matches and uneven marriages have been made there?
But the taverns had their closing time. The streets emptied, leaving only the watchman and his dog.
4 o'clock. The cock is crowing. I must to my home be going. When all other men do rise, then must I shut up mine eyes.